Hey guys, it's Moo here. How you doing? Anyway, happy Friday the 13th. Just wanted to talk to you. I'm gonna take this shit off my head before people accuse me of trying to rip off Nuxanor. Anyway, we're getting close to Halloween, or as I like to call it, the season of miracles. A lot of people call it the spooky season. I think it's a time of joy and terror, and a combination of the two that makes you maybe sociopathic. I want to talk though. I grew up in the 80s and 90s. I'm a little older, folks, I'm a little long in the tooth compared to some of you whippersnappers out there. And I was trying to compare Halloween to this day and age to Halloween when I was a kid. There's some pros and cons. So let's start with just Halloween as a kid in general, say early back to 80s, because I was born in 83, so I do remember some of the 80s for Halloween. And all of the 90s, well, I don't remember all the 90s or the 2000s or yesterday, but we'll, neither here nor there. We had everyone participating in Halloween, except for maybe the Jehovah's Witnesses, and you didn't even know where they lived because they didn't talk about being Jehovah's Witnesses unless they were knocking on your door. There wasn't a big problem with people celebrating Halloween that were even really religious at the time. The JCs and things like that were doing haunted houses at the churches. It was amazing. It was a great time. The JCs would get in there and they would get involved with the church. They'd build it up and they'd do this thing. Certain churches have their own haunted houses. People would have haunted houses in their front yards. It was an amazing time. Halloween parties were off the charts. I just remember from hearing about it from my dad and from his friends and things like that. Obviously, I wasn't attending adult Halloween parties unless my parents threw one, which never really happened because there were 5 kids and trick-or-treating was the thing. Actually, at that part of the time, there was only 3 kids trick-or-treating and a baby, so it didn't count. Regardless, we'd go trick-or-treating. Now, I would get sick every year for Halloween up until the time that I was too old to trick-or-treat because God doesn't like me. And one thing that would happen is I'd get out and I'd trick-or-treat for like an hour, maybe 2 hours, and then I would just become violently ill. And the same thing would happen right around Christmas time, right at Christmas Day. I would be fine and then suddenly violently ill and be sick the entire holiday. Both of those things were happening until I was probably 19, 21 years old. I still do get kind of sick around Halloween and Christmas, but it's not like bad. It's usually the sniffles like I have every freaking day. If you've watched this or if you've watched Vanishing Gates for the last almost decade, I think 7 years, you would know that I have a cold frequently. It's not really a cold, it's allergies. I'm always congested and stuffed up. I'm a ginger. Regardless, looking back at Halloween was great. We'd all go trick-or-treating. It would be tons of people. Your parents, at the time, even though I was young, I wasn't really allowed to trick-or-treat solo with my friends until the 90s when we had moved to California from Oregon. And, at that point, we'd still go trick-or-treating with my mom for a couple of years. And then as I got maybe 6th grade, it started to be more like, hey, let me go out on my own. And from then on, I did that until I stopped trick-or-treating, which I think was around 16, 17 years old. When I finally stopped going trick-or-treating, I'd stay home and hand out candy. We would go and do the thing at that point where we were on our own. We'd change costumes and go back out, and we would come back with bags. And I would be sick to my gut, just dying ill the next day, but I wanted that candy. I'd go home and get sick in the toilet and lay there for a while, drink some water, switch my costumes, and go back out for another run before just being totally floored the rest of the night. High school was the best time for that because I wasn't as sick as much, so I'd be out more often. But Halloween in general was fun. Decorating was always fun. I remember when we moved to California, helping my aunt and uncle. They'd be in the newspaper every year for their Halloween display on their front yard, and I'd be very involved with helping with that. Prior to that, my dad would do a display before my parents split, and I would be involved with helping him do that. He thought that he was the Halloween version of Chevy Chase, or Chevy Chase. My brain is ridiculous. Clark, thank you, Griswold, and for Halloween. And he would go all out, falling off of the roof maybe once a year around Christmas or Halloween, depending on how many lights he put up. One year, in fact, my dad was so involved in Halloween, and this is probably what ingrained it in me now as an adult to be so involved in Halloween. My dad took this hard hat that he had. He had worked, at the time, a mechanic. Prior to that, he had been in the forest fire as a forest firefighter in Sweet Home, Oregon, and then he had worked in a lumber mill in security in some capacity. So he had hard hats. He took one of them and he sawed a hole in it, or an area, a gash in it, stuck an axe, wedged a hand axe in there, a hatchet, and painted it up to look like blood. Now, it looked to me, as a child, a young child, still in elementary school, I think I was maybe in kindergarten this year, and it looked real as all get out. And then he did his face, and he looked like he was a walking corpse. Me being a child, I wouldn't have known what a corpse looked like, but as an adult who's seen many, 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 many more corpses than I care to remember, he looked like a corpse. He did a very good job with his makeup and everything. Tattered clothes, the whole 9 yards. And he came out, and my mom had gone back. I had come back from trick-or-treating. She had dropped me off. And I was going to stay with Dad for the rest of the night because I felt so ill. And my dad came out. I had not seen his costume. He'd been scaring the crap out of trick-or-treaters for well over an hour or two at this point. And he came out, and I dropped my candy, and I ran. And he acted like he was going to come at me because it's the kind of sense of humor my father had. So I ran, scurried away like a frightened little boy, as I literally was scurrying away like a frightened little boy, as a frightened little boy, ran into the kitchen, climbed into a cabinet. I have no idea how I fit in this cabinet, but I did, and hid. And he lost track of me. I don't know how I eluded him, but he couldn't find me for the rest of the freaking night. I could hear him freaking out and cussing, and then like trying to figure out where the hell I was. And I wasn't coming out of there to save my life, because at this point, I'm in every horror movie I'd ever been in. So, oh joy, when I finally come out, my mom comes home and I find out, oh no, I'm an idiot, Dad's just wearing a costume. Which I should have known, considering it was Halloween, but for some reason my kindergarten brain did not put those two things together. Costumes back then, I've heard this argument that costumes back then were better. That was true if you were a teenager or an adult in the 80s. The masks, the quality of masks you'd find in the Halloween stores were way better than the quality of masks you're finding now for half the freaking price. Yeah, I know inflation and all that, so maybe about the same price, $80 till today, but the cost of living in the 80s was much easier anyway. So I look around at the stores now, and I'm so annoyed with the masks, because a lot of these are ripoffs of old masks made in the 80s and 70s that were far superior, even in the 90s. It started being towards the mid to late 90s that the quality of masks started to really deteriorate. And after somewhere in the 2000s, they just became garbage. Unless you're buying from one of the freaking high-end mask makers, then you're not getting what we used to get. And those guys, movie quality stuff, Distortions Unlimited, oh my God. In general, any of that stuff. Those guys, there's some dudes out there that make the craziest crap. And a lot of these guys started doing it just to scare people on Halloween in their garage. So I noticed the costumes in general, though, like now that my kids get, I would say they're actually a slightly better quality overall than the costumes we had then. I know we want to look back and say, oh man, they were just nostalgia. It was plastic, sweaty, disgusting clothing, quote unquote, that you'd put over like a poncho, and then you'd have these really thin plastic masks. You could buy a mask at the dollar store. In fact, that's where I got this to commemorate Friday the 13th, which wouldn't fit my head if I was 150 pounds lighter, because I have a giant head, apparently. But the quality of this mask alone is better than the quality of mask I was getting as a child until I got old enough to get a Friday the 13th hockey mask. Because there was some licensed product. My dad or my mom, one of them, finally said I could have one, and it was the most expensive Halloween present, or Halloween costume, which was a present to me, that I had at the time. Since then, obviously, I've spent a lot more money on costumes because I do Halloween big every year. Back then, small candy was the deal. You didn't have people giving out big candy bars, hardly ever. You would get homemade goodies. You would get caramel apples. But these would be neighborhoods where you knew people, and you could go into their house. A lot of the time, if they were having a small family gathering, you could go in there and hang out with kids you knew to school because they'd invite you in. You'd eat some snacks. You'd go with the kid, talk the kid out of the house, and we'd go and continue on. As we got older, that became a big no-no. You'd see more of the bigger candy bars, but you'd see none of the homemade goodies. I'm actually happy about this. A lot of that, people are like, well, that urban legend about Halloween candy being poisoned. That's not an urban legend. That did happen. It didn't happen often. There's one case in particular that caused the national freak out about the entire thing. A man had actually tried to kill his own children with pixie sticks and poisoned them. I think I had actually talked about this on our our paranormal slash true crime podcast and YouTube channel, Vanishing Gates. If you haven't seen that, feel free to check us out if you're into the more spooky side of things in true crime. And so that caused this big spiral, especially in the 80s and 90s when it spread around my town. Suddenly, my mom's checking all of my candy, and if it looked silly, it was toasted oats. You could have brand new Reese's, and sometimes the bag just wasn't sealed properly. If there wasn't air in that bag, that stuff went in the garbage, which now as an adult, it's more likely she took them and ate them. But back then, it was like a big deal. It's good to check your kids' candy. I'm not saying it's not. Kids, if you're out there trick-or-treating, let your parents check your candy. There are sick people out there. No one's putting drugs in your candy, though, because drugs are expensive. Don't do drugs. You can't afford them anyway. But I digress. Halloween, everyone in the 80s and 90s would decorate their house. It was rare that you would find a house that didn't have some fashion of decoration or was giving out candy. Now it is crazy. Lights out all over the place. Even up and through high school, Halloween was a big deal. The town would treat Halloween like a big deal. And none of this trunk-or-treating bullshit, which I freaking hate. Just go door to door, folks. Just make Halloween Halloween again. You would go to this place we have called Henderson Center. And you would go there, and every store would give out candy. There would be people performing a little bit in the streets. Old Town Eureka would have a big thing where people were going on. Sometimes there would be vendors, etc., etc. There was always something to do. Pumpkin patches. We had 4 or 5 haunted houses in town that I would go to when I was in my, teens and 20s. And they stopped doing them altogether now, and there's like 3 left, maybe 2, that you can find within the vicinity of where I live. And almost no one does them at home. I've been trying to for a few years, and the reason I haven't finished it is volunteers and budget. I got a family to raise. I can't spend all of my money on Halloween as much as I'd like. Believe me, I already spend a lot on Halloween. I don't just buy candy, I buy the big candy bars because I'm that guy. I will always be that guy. Especially growing up in an era where that wasn't the norm. Now it's more common. Now people are also giving out treats to adults that are taking kids trick-or-treating. One year some guy handed me a 6-pack of beer. I was just walking around with my kids. I'm like, yes, thank you. Happy Halloween to me. I needed something while I was walking around. And, maybe I'll find a house that gives away cigars one day. Who knows? It won't be me. I'm not giving out cigars. But, we, every year at my place, we do our show live from my front yard as we give out candy every year. It's a weird thing, Halloween at my house for trick-or-treaters, because I always buy a crap ton of candy, regardless of how many trick-or-treaters I have the year before that. I will literally go for a year with 0 trick-or-treaters, maybe 1 or 2 towards the end, and then the next year I'll have 500 trick-or-treaters. And then the next year, 20. And the next year, 100. Next year, 0. Next year, 5. It's super sporadic. I can never tell. One of my busiest years was the year that COVID was really a big issue, 2020, when everything was shutting down. I said, no, we're not shutting this down. I'm not worried about it. I've been working as a beer distributor. I've been in every store in this fucking county every day without a mask. I got sick in February. I'm fine now. It's okay. I put a little slide thing in my yard, a little candy chute that decorated it, and you could slide the candy about 12 feet down without having to worry about breathing on a kid, and they'd be able to get their candy bar. They'd tell me what they wanted, down the chute. And we gave out so much candy that year. The next years after that, it started to the last few years have been just dead. I'll get some high schoolers at the end, or once in a while, there'll be somebody who knows, because we decorate early. I'm decorating late this year. It used to be I'd decorate the end of August. The last day of August was Halloween season. That was it. I was decorating, and it would take me the month of September just to decorate. And then I still wouldn't be done because I'd be nitpicking at what I wanted to do. Then I had to figure out my costume, etc. Halloween's a big deal at my house. The whole house, inside and out, decorated for Halloween. But last year we didn't, because last year we were trying to buy the house. We've lived in this place for over a decade, renting, and they were going to sell it. We didn't know if we were going to get to buy it until October 10th when we signed the final paperwork and it closed. So I got into fucking high gear. I had already gotten rid of a crap ton of my decorations, like probably 7 or 8 big totes worth of stuff, including larger props that I had that just needed to have some repair before I put them out. And I just said, well, it's broken. I'm going to throw it away or give it away. And so I'm short on decorations this year. So I'm going to have to make it work and build all that back up. But now I can do even more because it's my house, which is amazing. Never had that feeling before. But, you know, haunted houses, Halloween in general seems to have changed. We would go to haunted locations every year. We'd try to find a haunted house to walk by, and it would freak us out. We'd walk by it, we'd run by. There would be one house within one neighborhood that we'd make sure that we'd almost walked up to knock because it looked like it was abandoned, but we knew it was haunted, or someone had died there, or some other story. And we'd haul ass away from it about halfway up the walkway and not go back. Or we'd go back and TP it, or egg it, or something. These are things we actually did. Halloween shows on TV were amazing. The TGIF, that lineup, every sitcom had a Halloween episode. One of my favorites was one of the Martin episodes, and just hilarious. The guy tells a story about kissing a ghost, and the guy has half his face eaten. He says, "A ghost? Oh, I thought you meant a goat." And half his face is gone. I guess you had to be there. This is the 90s. But it was a different era. Now you see less Halloween shows. But I can actually go to these haunted locations and do investigations. I do that for my show, but now I can do that just for fun because they're open. There's haunted tours in our Old Town area here where a guy goes and you follow him around and he tells you ghost stories and in front of certain locations that are supposed to be what happened there. From what I hear, that's up in the air. Whether or not that's true or he makes it up off the fly, I have no idea. We're finally starting to see more haunted houses in the area. I went to 2 last year that were really cool. And one had like a haunted like carnival or a Halloween carnival outside of it. So it was vendors and stuff. That was really awesome. I would love to see more and more of that kind of thing. Because Halloween should be something special. Something to help you get away from all the regular parts of life and to face horror up front and then realize it's not really that scary. We watch scary movies all October and September long in preparation for Halloween. And it's always been that way in my house. My kids aren't scared of horror movies. There's not a movie out there my kids see that they're having nightmares over. My oldest daughter especially, one of the first things we watched that was a horror movie was Alien. And that is legitimately a horror movie. Possibly one of the most frightening movies at all when it comes down to the overall feeling and the creature of the xenomorph and all of the practical and special effects. But I explained to her, I'm like, hey, you're going to see scary stuff. None of this is real. It's makeup like on Halloween. And she went into it knowing that. It didn't take her out of it completely, so she was still able to enjoy it, but it didn't terrify her. And Halloween should be kind of like that. You know, I went around knowing it was totally fake. I think it was 6th grade. I was walking around, and this kid I went to school with, I believe it was a kid named Clay. I can't remember which kid, but I think it was a kid named Clay. And he had the hockey mask. And he had the chainsaw without the chain on it. And he came ripping out of one section after we walked in, his side, the yard in front of his house. You'd walk in through one gate, and then there was his front door, and there's a back gate to his backyard. And he came ripping out of there with that chainsaw. All of us knew it was fake, and all of us were still hauling ass to get away from the guy, knowing full well we weren't going to get killed. But it was the fun of it. We laughed so hard about it. We talked about that prank. Our group of friends talked about that around the school for months. Up until Christmas, we were still talking. I'm still talking about it today. And that's something you would see anywhere, you know. Now you're like, whatever. But when you're in 6th grade and something you've never seen someone do, especially someone your age, it's super freaking cool. So yeah, a lot of good memories to be associated with Halloween. You know, I don't know. How do you guys feel about it? It's very Americanized how we celebrate it. We used to celebrate Christmas in America in a very similar fashion to Halloween. A lot of people don't realize that. Yeah, it's mostly an Irish holiday, just realistically. So my family especially are going to enjoy it. You know, my dad's mom was born on the boat, allegedly, coming from Ireland to America. So it's a really close family route for us to go back to Ireland. Now, I'm a proud American through and through, don't get me wrong. But it's fun to be Irish, an Irish American. I'm not Irish, but I'm Irish of American descent. Totally fun. And that means Halloween has a more special place in my heart directly. It can be for everybody, of course. But Samhain, being a Gaelic holiday, I got to have a heart for it regardless. It's going to be important to my family. How is it for your guys' family? Let me know in the comments. Share some of your favorite memories of Halloween. What are you going to be for Halloween this year? What are your plans for tonight? Friday the 13th. Anyway, if you like the content, great. Please hit a like. If you haven't subscribed yet, I would really appreciate it. If you don't like the video, hey, hit dislike and tell me why in the comments. It doesn't bother me to have some, thoughtful criticism. It just helps you grow. All right, guys, we'll probably come back with some either YouTube drama or video game content. It's a never-ending well stream of BS around here on the internet. All right, enjoy your weekend. Be safe. Be spooky. I'm Moo Juice. I'll see you guys later.